We have a very prestigious panel with us tonight. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves to you. And the reason that we're here tonight is really to impart information, get you excited, and if you can leave tonight having one or two real things that you can do to affect change that you want in your life, developing a habit or two, take that with you. There is no reason tonight that you can't leave feeling empowered and excited about something that you want to do in your career, whether it is a project that you're working on or if it's something personal that you truly have been looking to change. Listen tonight to that inner voice and find those things that say, it was important for me to hear that. Remember it, write it down if you can, and take it with you tonight. Use this event, use these amazing panelists that we have tonight to really affect change in your life tonight. So we're going to start out, and Adoree, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and why you're happy and excited to be here tonight.
Sure. My name's Adoree, and I'm a writer. I write primarily on psychology, health, and happiness. And, sorry, can you hear me better right now? Okay, thanks. And I received a master's in applied positive psychology from the University of Pennsylvania, and it's a field that looks at the empirical study of human flourishing. I also did another master's at Harvard looking at Buddhist practices of the cultivation of both body and mind. I'm currently working on a book right now which is called Intrinsic Me, Weight Loss and Fitness, that looks at the way different people use their psychological strengths to improve their health in ways that works best for them. And I'm really excited to be on this panel to talk about habits because I'm really interested in all the research behind habits, but thinking about how can we apply this knowledge to help it work best for us. So thanks so much for having me here.
Thank you. Richard?
Oh, hello, my name's Richard O'Connor. I'm a psychotherapist and author. I practice in Connecticut and New York City and have published about 5 books by now. Probably the best known is called Undoing Depression. But my latest is on our subject tonight. This is Rewire. Change your brain to break bad habits, overcome addictions, and conquer self-destructive behavior. I have always been interested in this subject because it's part of doing psychotherapy. Most of what you're dealing with in psychotherapy is helping people get out of their own way. I in preparation for this book, I learned a great deal about what neuroscience has got to say about how the brain works in developing habits. So I'm very glad to be here, although unlike most of you SAG-AFTRA members, I suffer with an extreme case of stage fright. So getting that out on the table is one of my strategies to elicit your sympathy and get you on my side. So,
that's a wonderful technique. And David?
Seems to have worked. Hi, I'm David Diamond. I'm a career coach for artists. I've been career coaching, working with artists, mostly involved in theater, film, and television, actors, directors, playwrights, designers for the past about 15 years. I'm also a theater director, and I also run the La Mama International Symposium for Directors, the Playwright Retreat, and Master Acting Workshops that take place every summer in Spoleto, Italy, in this beautiful villa in the countryside, where I have to go every summer and eat this amazing food and live in this beautiful place and meet these great artists who come from all over the world to teach and take the various workshops. So, but somebody's got to do it, so it's me. I also host a radio show called Artists, Lives, and Careers, which is on the second and fourth Wednesday of every month at 4 o'clock on Blog Talk Radio. So in that capacity, I interview a lot of artists and talk to them about their careers, and it's it's been fascinating to learn about all the different ways people, especially actors and other kinds of theater artists and film artists, create their lives in this business and how they maintain their lives and flourish in this career. So it's been a great learning experience. It's the question that has plagued me all these years of doing this work has been about how do you make a career in this business, and what can we learn from each other, and how can we help each other to make the most effective choices to move our careers forward. So I hope that in our discussion today we can explore some of those things. Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. I also want to let you know that Anthony is going to be joining us. He's going to be sitting on the end there, so at some point he'll come in and join into the conversation, introduce himself, and let you know who he is and what the heck he's doing here. And I also want to say that because we are filming tonight, at the end we're not going to do question and answer typical way that we've done it in other formats. We ask that you write it down on a piece of paper, and you will see Melissa or Kate collecting those questions, and she'll bring them up to me. One of them will bring it up to me. And so if something comes along and you do want to ask a question, don't feel like we're not going to address it. Go ahead, write it on a piece of paper, catch one of them, and they'll bring it up, and we'll make sure that it's addressed tonight, okay? So first of all, thank you all truly for being here. We are really excited. Also taking this idea of the science and applying it to actors. So what we want to find out is, first of all, if you could explain, if someone would like to take this, the science of how the brain processes habits.
I'd like to start with this.
Thank you,
'cause
Richard.
My brain is fresh with information on this. There's just been a revolution in neurology in the past 15 years. We all used to assume that everyone was born with a certain number of brain cells and that they'd die off sometime in adolescence, and we're left with a fixed number, which is static forever. So just in the past 15 years, since we have new instruments that can really allow us to see the brain as it works, people have discovered that, in fact, the brain is constantly forming new nerve cells, new stem cells that have the capacity to migrate out and replace cells in the brain that have become worn out or dysfunctional. We also realize now that the way the brain learns is by developing and enriching connections between nerve cells, between neurons, so that when you learn a habit, when you practice a habit, what's going on in your brain is that there's a little network of neurons being formed, and every time that you practice that habit, that network is getting more enriched and more complex and more efficient at doing its job, doing whatever you want to do. So if you're practicing bad habits, you're only getting better at bad habits. If you're practicing good habits, you're constantly getting better at good habits. It's kind of nice to know that. Even imaginary practice seems to help. There was one study done in New York a few years ago where they recruited volunteers to practice a one-handed piano lesson for a week. And within a week, the researchers could see the development of a network of cells. They could also see that among another group of subjects who were told only to imagine for an hour a day, moving their hand to correspond to the piano notes. And in those people as well, that there was growth in a neuronal network. So I think it's not only practicing a manual skill, but deeply focusing and concentrating on a task, both approaches can help build up new positive habits. Maybe.
Yeah, I'd love to add on to what
Please do.
Richard's saying. I think also it's helpful to think of, when you think about habits, to know that we have two different minds at play. So we have the intentional mind and we have the habitual mind. So what happens is when you're doing a certain action for the first time, you're engaging the intentional mind. And this involves more of working memory. It's connected to the prefrontal cortex. There's a lot of attention that goes into it. But the more we're doing an action over and over again, it moves into what we can call the habitual mind, which is really about associative memory. That means cues and responses. So the behavior has to be triggered by a certain cue, and then the response will engage itself. A good example of this is driving a car. So when you are driving your car for the first time, right, you're really focused on what you're doing. It's very intentional. But we've been driving our car every day for so long that now it's largely on autopilot. I mean, how many people multitask, right? We do tons of different things. So it's important to remember that when we're building habits and when we're using our habits, we're engaging this habitual mind, which is really unintentional. And that's part of the thing we need to think about when we're thinking about, later, how do we break these habits?
Now, David, what I'd like you to do is, because you work with actors all of the time, make this real for us. What are some bad habits that you see in actors that are habitual, that end up being things that need to be broken, that are in their way, people that you coach and work with all the time? What do you see over and over again in terms of habits, bad habits for actors? Because we don't have any and we don't know what that would be, right?
Let me approach the question this way. The most destructive or let's call them unuseful habits that I see in most of the people I work with are not to do with specific actions or what I would call practices, but more to do with habitual thinking. The way we think about things becomes entrenched, and so when things happen, we start to think about things in the very same way over and over again, and can't get out of that habit of thinking in that way. Hi. Okay. Welcome.
Welcome, Anthony.
I'm sorry.
So you're talking, yeah.
Talking about.
We're talking about habits and how they get in our way, and also discussing the way that thinking can get in our way, and that you were just talking about that.
Yeah, so for
Continue on.
example, when you go to an audition and let's say you do 10 auditions in a week and you don't get cast or don't get called for any of those roles, our habit might be to think, oh, I did something wrong. Oh, I am not good enough. Oh, they didn't like me because I did the stupid thing in the audition. We might go to this place of habitually thinking a negative thought about ourselves in relationship to not getting called in for a certain role. And so there's something that you can do to recognize that that's what's happening, and to go to a different place with your thinking so that your thinking is not related to something that's going to give you a license to feel badly about yourself. I mean, the way I work with my clients is to help them understand when, like Richard was saying, we get in our own way because our thinking is caught up. We get caught up in our thinking about how things are supposed to be, and when they don't work out the way we think they're supposed to be, then we say, oh, okay, I can feel badly about myself because all these things didn't happen. But the reality is the thinking is not real. It's something that comes into our mind and goes out of our mind. We have a million thoughts every day. They come in and they go out. And the ones that we hold on to and repeat and habitually think about and go over and over in our mind, the ones that stick with us are the ones that create the feelings inside of us that are either going to be a negative feeling or a positive feeling or maybe a neutral feeling. So that's the kind of habit that I see most often in people that we like to work through and work around and break through, so that our thinking doesn't always go to the same place. And because you're in a business that's a creative business, you have at your disposal all the skills and talents that you need to break through as a creative person, because it's creativity that's going to be the difference between keeping the same habitual thinking and changing it. So why is it that artists, and so I know so many of them, they tend to always go to the negative when something doesn't go right. We always think it's about us. It's it's something wrong with us. We're such creative people. How come we're not as creative in the way that we go about creating our life experience and our careers as we are when we actually get the job and get on the set and start to do the creative work? It's our greatest asset, our greatest skill. It's what we have at our fingertips. A lot of people go through a lot of different kinds of processes and therapies to find their creativity, to access it, but that's what you guys do every day. So let's work together to use that creativity in the creation of new ways of perceiving the world.
Thank you so much, David. It's just so wonderful to hear you take the thoughts and the science behind it all and really apply it moving forward for actors. Now, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Anthony. We're so glad that you can join us. We knew you were going to be coming in a little bit late. Anthony, would you please tell us a little bit about you and why you're happy and excited to be here? Because we certainly are happy and excited to have you.
That's very sweet. First of all, I make every student of mine who arrives late, they have to come in and say, "I'm sorry I'm late," because that's just professional. And here I am late. And I'm really sorry. I really am. I'm only late because I teach class till 7:30. And I just...
Tough room.
Anyway.
Where'd the love go?
So here I am. And what was the next question?
Well, tell us a little bit about you. I mean,
Oh, I'm an acting coach.
Yes. You want to say anything else?
I could really say a lot about me.
Sure, we want to hear about you.
This isn't my strong point, but I believe that the actors are really a special breed, and that they carry a very magical DNA in them that survived for thousands of years. Two strands, one to get up in front of other people, and one to become other people. And that's why I'm excited to be here, because I'm with the sons and daughters of magicians and sorcerers.
Wow, thank you. Beautiful. It's so exciting to me how each individual here brings their own spin to such a great topic, too, about change. So I just want to say that we appreciate the diversity here and the ability to share with us tonight. So I want to ask it, and this might start again with you, Richard, or if you want to take it, Adoree. Does the brain actually change when you take on a new habit?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean that's
Microphone. Thanks.
sorry. That's the big new news in neurology in the past 15 years. The brain does change with experience. It doesn't change in any dramatic way. You have to have the very advanced scientific instrumentation to be able to see the change, but now we can see it. The piano players I mentioned before, jugglers, developing any kind of motor skill, it shows up in the brain. So there's evidence that developing emotional skills or positive habits or negative habits, they exist structurally in the brain. Part of the bad news is that it doesn't seem to be possible to tear out those old circuits. They seem to go on. They fall into disuse. What we want to do is to replace them with positive habits, But it is a risk that under stress, those old routines are still there, sort of etched in the brain, and we can fall back into our old bad habits.
Adoree, it looks like a lot of the work that you've done is about happiness. So, steering into the happiness stream, how do you recommend those old habits that are still there that we don't want to reactivate? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, what we want to do is we want to use kind of the way that habits work in order to change them. So, just like Richard was talking about, is these neural pathways are already there. So how can we think about kind of working with the cues and the behavior and the rewards that are already in place to change them? So an example of this is, let's say you're always eating, distracted eating while you're watching TV. It's really hard to kind of completely eradicate that behavior. So what you have to do instead is think about, okay, I've got to actually consciously change from eating candy to eating an apple or something. Because if you think about trying to completely form a new behavior, it's going to take much more time than if you're already working with the behavior that you're already doing. So you already know that you eat while you watch TV. So try and think about, okay, how can I work in this kind of positive habit into a bad habit that I'm already doing?
Oh, that's just great because I'm eating in front of the TV all the time. And I will definitely use that one and grab an apple and some fruit and sit there and not have to feel so bad about, I'm not going to eat it all, as I get home and I'm tired and I just want to rest and relax. So that is really helpful. Go ahead, Anthony.
Well, and it's funny because we're doing a lot of this in class, and I use the terms neural pathways, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. But I do know that, and this is most probably a little bit too practical, but one of the destructive habits that I encounter is that actors, when they order takeout, they picture the shrimp lo mein. When they read a novel, they see it. Then they get a script and they just see the words. Worse, as soon as they see the words, and this is a big, deep neural pathway, they start to hear the conventional, cliched line reading. And this is something we are trying very, very hard in class to change, but actually with some success. But I think we're all here because we want to do work that gets work. I think we're talking about what gets in the way of that. Or, in Faust it says, I will leap up to my God, who pulls me down, or what pulls me down. But I think one of the things that gets in the way of our doing work that gets work is that we end up just being voice actors, and we are more than that. And so one of the things that I encounter is this terribly, deeply ingrained tendency to see the line and right away hear the line reading and right away say it, and then we're just voice acting. But it fascinates me that the shrimp lo mein is vividly in our imaginations. And I think Mr. Stanislavski's right. We have to speak to the mind's eye of the partner. That pops through the lens. That pops off the screen. And I think that's a big thing that when we neglect it, it prevents our doing work that gets work. And I think when we start to really make it a situation instead of a recitation, then I think we start to maybe get work. But I'm just coming from a very practical place.
That's what we're actors here. We want practical advice. And David, I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, really creating an authentic experience as an actor, because what we've been talking about is habits. You're talking about, the way we think and we get into habitual thinking. How can we create a more authentic viewpoint coming from us, that we're not just going on automatic, but when we're looking at something, when we pick up a script, and instead of just, like you were saying, Anthony, hearing the lines, can you just talk a little bit about how you found that to be successful in an application to find that authentic voice for the actor?
Okay, I'll give that a shot. It's not something that I am intentional about. It's not in my intentional mind to do that. But I think what works best for artists that I've worked with is to allow the wisdom and the inspiration and insight about a character to come through you instead of trying to force yourself into it. I was interested in what you were saying about the habits of the actor, and I wondered if you also worked with actors to develop habits for the characters that they're playing that are different from the habits that they have. Because it seems to me the best way to break through to authenticity is to not get stuck in the habits that you have, but to try and create new pathways by doing different things, doing things that are different than the things you've done before. And in a lot of with a lot of my clients, the work has been about them trying new practices, trying new habits, trying new ways of thinking, as we call them, like as an experiment. Like, oh, let's try when you go into this situation to to do something different than you would usually do, and that allows you to see things and see perspectives that you haven't seen before. I'm not sure.
That's great. I love that. And do you have an answer about the finding the characters breaking, working through character to break habits?
Well, it's remarkable because, one of the things we do is character work, and we've seen again and again and again that aspects of talent that are sometimes blocked when it's them up there are released when it's not them up there. And I guess that one of the other bad habits is the continual painting of self-portraits. And again, I know that we are capable of more than just self-portraiture, but to the extent that the talent can be released when it's not you up there is the extent to which I think you have to develop your ability to not say again and again, I'm trying really hard not to use bad language, Romeo's a guy just like me, Juliet's a girl just like me, because at that moment you're denying that DNA that I'm talking about to become other people. And it's also trapping you in your self-portrait. And by the way, what are you going to do when your self-portrait changes? I'm just saying.
I'd love to
Great question. Please go
to
ahead.
add on to that because it makes me think about there's one psychologist named Wendy Wood, and she studies a lot about habits, and she looks at how do we change and form new habits. And one of the things she recommends is take advantage of lifestyle changes. These are big events that happen when you change your career or you move to a different home. These are times when you can really kind of work on the cues and the responses. And it makes me think about what actors do every day, because they're kind of doing these lifestyle changes when they take on a new character. So it seems like you guys have the best opportunity to completely change, what you're doing in your habits, because when you take on a new character, your old self is gone in that moment. And, other people who aren't actors, we have to look for these other type of lifestyle changes when it seems like maybe there might be something that, like of what you're saying, that when you take on this different role and you put yourself aside, you're kind of putting these old neural pathways aside.
Well, you have to, because the question Stanislavski posed, and went through several changes, is ultimately, if I were the character in that situation, how would I react? What would I do? Not what would I feel, but what would the character do? And at that moment, perforce, you're dealing with at least beginning to forge perhaps a new neural pathway. I got to stop using that term because I'm not a scientist. It sounds good.
Works.
I keep thinking of the wheelbarrow. It will wear a rut in the ground, and we got to try to somehow. But that new rut has to be attractive.
Mm-hmm.
If you, I've learned this the hard way, that if you say to your wheelbarrow, God damn it, your wheelbarrow will just shut down.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be fun. It has to be interesting. It has to be juicy. Or it's what Stanislavski said, it has to be a lollipop.
Well, and could you talk to us about that lollipop, Richard? How do you make a gain? What does a small gain look like? And how long does it take to make one? I mean, we're talking about what we see, okay, this is the way things are, and this is where we want to move to. So that space that's in between, what is a gain? How long does it take to make a gain, to create new habits?
The answer is that it really depends. There's no fixed time. We can see that the brain starts changing almost immediately when we practice new skills, and we get that means we get a tiny bit better at whatever it is that we want to do. But so, in the case of jugglers, someone did a study, 3 months of juggling practice, an hour a day, could see really significant changes in two areas of the brain after 3 months, an hour a day. And of course, the subjects were much more, much better at juggling. But you're hardly going to be an expert juggler after 3 months of practice. 10,000 hours to become an expert, someone says that. I don't know if that's really true or not, but
It's a way to sell books. That was
Yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell, I think, who said it's
yeah,
10,000 hours to become an expert at something.
right. So it really depends on your standard. If you're taking stage dramatics, if you're in a class in sword fighting, I understand they still teach such things at some schools. After a few months, you may be just fine to do your stage sword fighting, but you don't want to go to the Olympics and try it out there. More practice, the better you get, and you keep on practicing. And yes, you're right about the lollipop. It's got to be. I like the word juicy. It doesn't have to be fun. It's great if it can be fun, but it has to be stimulating. It has to. It has to
be interesting.
Yes, it has to do something to you, move you in some way, even if it's just dealing with a bad habit of like procrastinating. If you can really allow yourself to feel proud of spending an hour cleaning off your desk or organizing your shelves, just to savor that feeling, to allow yourself to feel good about that, you have to do that. Otherwise, you're sunk. You're just going to keep on, the bad habits are going to keep on bringing you down.
And I think there's something, too, about expectation. Because sometimes when we've worked really hard, we worked hard on the character, we prepared our audition, we did everything exactly right, and then having to let go of what is going to happen in a situation where we have zero control. But really to, like you're saying, savor what you did. And talking about, bad habits of thinking, David, that you were talking about, where you might get into a rut of, this is the way things happen, and I audition, and nothing happens for me. But to really take in that aspect of, hey, I did the work, I can feel good about that, just to maybe start steering that, wheelbarrow outside of the rut that we've been putting it into.
I had one client, an actor, who was so terrified of auditions that he wouldn't even, this is a while ago, so if those of you remember Backstage when it was just a newspaper, he wouldn't even buy the copy of Backstage to read what the auditions were, because maybe there'd be something in there that would be right for him that he'd actually have to think about going to. And so it became such a huge fear. And the way we started to work through it was, exactly what you guys were talking about, a kind of step-by-step process of, in the first week he was buying the newspaper but not opening it, and the second week he was opening it, and the third week he actually was reading the listings, and by the time we got to the place where he was actually going to go to an audition, we worked on changing his attitude, like you were saying about cleaning your shelf or whatever, about what it means to be going into that room in that moment, and how can he use that moment as an opportunity to be his full creative self, have fun, enjoy, and not be under that pressure you were talking about what's going to happen afterwards. And so he went in and he was much more relaxed, talking to the other actors in the waiting room, and his audition started to get better and better. But he actually got himself into the room, but it was a process. It took a while, and he was so pleased because he started to get cast a lot, which was a good outcome. It didn't have to go that way, but it was a slow and very process that one step in front of the other.
And can you talk a little bit, that brings up for me this idea of accountability, because he was coming back to you and saying, this is what I did, and you created a plan, a step-by-step plan, because maybe he wasn't in the position to figure it out himself because he was just so mired in this thinking. So have you seen, in terms of like partnership or accountability, how this can accelerate the process of change?
Yeah, well, I mean, this kind of gets back into the lollipop, conversation we're having, which is when we have a habit. We talked about cues and we talked about the responses, but the third process is there has to be a reward, right? Something that positively reinforces the behavior so that you want to repeat it. Now, when we look at all the different behaviors that we have, the best form of motivation is intrinsic motivation, something that you're naturally inclined to do, that you enjoy. Again, it doesn't have to be fun per se, but there's something inherently, interesting about it that's connected to yourself. So I think it's really important to think about because accountability could be a sense of, you could look at it, let's say you're really high on something like honesty or trust. Something that when you have a bond with somebody, that could be really important for you not procrastinating, whereas somebody else, it doesn't matter if I, break that bond. Or the accountability could be if you're really high in something like loving and lovable, where might be a strength where your family members, your loved ones are really important to you. Then, all of a sudden, that accountability, telling them about your challenges and if you succeed or fail, that's really important. And those are the type of things I think it's really important to attach to these kind of more mundane behaviors that we have, to try and make it juicy, try and, make us entice a behavior that we might not want to do otherwise.
I just want to address the topic of shame, because I think, a lot of times when we become aware of a habit, maybe we're not even aware of it until somebody on the outside said something. Or maybe we have results that really aren't getting us what we want. And all of a sudden we're saying, it can't be that guy and that guy and that guy. I'm the common denominator. I'm the reason this is happening. And, in order to make a change, of course, we have to see that we need to make a change. But I think there's also a tendency to be, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this, or your agent points it out to you, or you got feedback from a casting director about something, and you can't even process it, and you just go into that place of, oh, I can't even touch that. So you got an awareness, which could be a gift, but how can you move out of that so you can actually make a change?
Let me just take a whack at that. As you said, it can be a gift. Shame and guilt are very powerful motivators. They are really clear signals to us that something is going on that shouldn't be going on. Trouble is, they're so intense that they can really confuse our thinking, and both the automatic brain and the conscious brain get all twisted up in knots trying to deal with these kinds of feelings. Can I bring up the subject of mindfulness?
Please
now?
do. Yes, yes. I'd love to hear about it.
I think we have to get to the subject of mindfulness. mindfulness is a very hot topic in my circles, at least these days. Mindfulness means developing the ability to experience your feelings without being swept away by them, to observe yourself more objectively. I like to say also with compassion and curiosity. So instead of making the automatic leap to, you jerk, you did it again, you use a little of that compassion and curiosity to say, well, here, why now? Why again? Why did I do it? And you try to use the thinking brain to look back over, triggers, cues, what sets you up in this situation to do something that makes you feel shamed. And then use that thinking brain again to plan out what you can do to prevent that kind of situation, how you can avoid those kind of triggers, what kind of behavior you want to practice as an alternative, and then start practicing that. Next time you're in that situation, do it a little bit differently. And each time you do it a little bit differently, it'll be easier to do it differently next time. Shame and guilt are really the motives for a lot of self-destructive behavior. And unfortunately, they can even be unconscious. We have all these defense mechanisms that help us not feel feelings. So shame and guilt get pushed down below the surface, and we act. And then, when we don't feel our feelings, they get expressed in our behavior. They get very often acted out in some sort of self-destructive manner. And when we see that happening, and it helps to have accountability, it helps to have someone else in your life who you're reporting to, who's your objective observer, to help us grab ourselves by the ponytail and say, let's do something about this situation so it doesn't keep on repeating itself.
And Anthony, I loved how you painted the picture of how the actor will know what to order at the Chinese restaurant and know how to, really see that. How have you seen, when you've worked with actors, on finding ways to unlock habits that are that lollipop, that are that juiciness that we're moving toward? How can we use our imaginations to help us with that?
Unplug. This is an old statistic. It's worse now. The average American spends over 11.5 hours a day in front of some screen or other. That's an old one. That's like several years ago. Without doubt, that is a higher rate now. Some sort of screen, was TV or a computer or your iPhone or your, I don't even know the names of these things, your iPad, your, that's killing us. I'm not saying it throw it all out. I'm saying, really, almost half a day. The screens, after a while, screen out the very humanity that is the actor's stock and trade. You're starting to never hear a human voice. You're getting the text. You're having arguments because you're not hearing the nuance in the voice, which is what Longfellow called the organ of the soul. You're walking down the street not observing humans because you've got beats or buds in your ears and you've got that smartphone in your face. And on top of everything else, you know that our profession is riddled with distraction. And this constant assault on our senses, the tweets and the IMs and the emails and all that stuff and the beeping and the tweeting, every one of those is a little burst of adrenaline. It is, scientifically. that's killing your concentration, which is the one thing that's going to save your ass when you're in the middle of a hugely distracting situation like an audition or even worse, on set. What really concerns me is that the concentration is the first lesson in Boleslavsky, and it's dying. But worse is that we're experiencing the world no longer person to person. How the hell can we hold the mirror up to nature when we've got a smartphone held up to our face? Unplug for some part of the day. I think that that's a hugely destructive and automatic neural pathway that has been plowed deeply and very quickly. And I urge us all to just realize what the hell it's doing to our humanity, which I believe is what we offer the world. Is it not?
I'd love to add to that, because I think that's really well said. It's very true that we're completely now driven by our phones and stuff. Like when I was on the train coming here, you know the sound that your iPhone makes when a text comes, right? It's so standard. The lady beside me, she was getting text, but every time that beep went off, I kept on. I didn't realize it, but I'd look and be like, and there's that feeling of like excitement that, oh, who's sending me a message? And then be like, oh, it's nothing. And it took me about 5 times before I realized she's got a friend who's talking to her. Nobody's talking to me right now. We don't realize how often we're driven by that, especially like on our computer, on the inbox, like if you have a Mac, and you have that number of how many emails you have to receive, and then it bings, or if you have your phone and it vibrates, all of these cues are really triggering the habitual mind and completely pulling us out of, even when we actually kind of are actually in that moment where we're using our intentional mind and maybe we want to, we can't control responding to. So I would just echo that just take a look in your day of how often you're responding to media instead of you deciding, oh, I actually want to pick up that phone and text somebody.
Can I just add one thing? You can tell that I'm a fanatic about that. Our best ideas come to us in the stillness. And we are losing the stillness. So we're losing our best ideas. Our creativity has always come to us when we are still. T.S. Eliot said something that I love about this. He said, where is the knowledge we have lost in information? And where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? And we're losing a lot in our mad quest for information. But if we are depriving ourselves of the stillness, then we are depriving ourselves of the well springs of our creativity. I can't tell you how many people I have encountered who have said, oh God, I'm so busy, I can't wait to just be here with you and have a moment. Within seconds. Yeah, well, that's just. So we say we need that time to visit with ourselves, but we don't actually take it.
And I think there's, thank you everyone for your contributions on that topic. I think there's also the balance between the time we spend as artists and the time we spend as getting work as artists. And I'm just wondering if you wouldn't mind addressing that, David.
Yeah, I would just say that all the time that we spend doing anything, if we're an artist, all the time that we do anything in our lives, we're doing it as artists. I don't think there's a difference. I don't think that we should approach our most creative selves, our most generous outpouring of our expression of who we are only when we're in front of the camera or on the stage. It's the way I think about an artist's life is that it's a way of life. It's not just what I do when I'm in this particular environment. And what that means is that our access to our emotional life, our access to our creative life, our access to, I just have to concur with my colleagues here about this idea of quiet and the quiet mind. And that's where we have access, like you were saying, to creativity. But not only that, it's like I like to think of it as the infinite creative potential of the world is at our disposal at any time if we ever are quiet enough to hear it. And that's, I think, that's the biggest idea I have about what people call, spirit or whatever you want to call it, this bigger intelligence behind life is all available to us. It's like we're kind of living in a cloud a lot of the time, and we can't always see every perspective. This is what's the great thing I love about theater and film and this business is that we're telling stories so that people who have the experience of receiving those stories can have a different perspective on the world, on their lives, on what's going on. And getting to that other perspective is the work that I try to do with the artist, help them see the different perspectives that they're missing in their own lives. It's kind of like, I think of it as like a glass elevator. Like we're living in a glass elevator, and when we're at the bottom of the elevator and looking out, all we can see is what's right behind us. But when our level of consciousness goes up, all of a sudden we get to see more. And then when it goes up really, really high, we get a different perspective on everything that's going on around us. And that is where when we're at, when you're in something and you're doing something that you're so invested in that you don't have time to think about how am I doing, how's it going, what's going on, but you're just, I call it in the flow of what you're doing. That's when we're at the top, when we're totally in the flow of it. It feels like everything is going right and everything is just like, the world is like just opened up to us. But understanding that it's the natural human condition for the elevator to go up and down, and giving ourselves a break when it's in the lower places and enjoying when it's in the higher places is a way to experience the world and not, get down on ourselves because we happen to be at a low point in the elevator at this moment. But we know it's going to go back up. So we can, with that knowledge, we can, survive the times when it's low because the highs will come back.
That's great. And, I also, I really love how you outlined earlier how non-action, we have habits that take us to places we'd prefer not to be in our thinking or in actual action. But in non-action, and what I liked about what you said is also being able to break that down so that when we are going up and we are, we're going up and down, to maybe be looking at more of a gradual approach to getting a way to almost accept what we are experiencing. Because, for instance, with the actor who, then had to buy a backstage 1 week and not look at it, and, that whole progression was so simple. But when you're in it and you're experiencing it, whether you're up or down in the elevator, you really can't almost see what's the little tiny step I could take. And I think that leads to, what you were talking about, Richard, with depression, since you've written a lot about that. Can you talk a little bit about like how can we gain an awareness when we're really in the feeling that's not helping us?
Metacognitive awareness is a new term for what we're talking about here. It's mindfulness again. Mindfulness, this kind of awareness, is another skill to be practiced. Willpower is a skill to be practiced.
Can you describe willpower for us? Because I think there's a lot of different interpretations of that. How you see it, how you see willpower, what it is.
Just a common definition of it, the sort of inner resolve to stick with something difficult or to not fall for temptation when it falls into our laps. I think that there's been a lot of research, and I agree totally about turn it off. I think speaking personally, one of the great things about my job is that for 50 minutes, 4 or 5 times a day, I get to turn everything off and just focus on one other person. And I'm not always in the zone. I mean, the elevator goes up and down for me too. But at least I'm trying, and I'm not being distracted by a whole lot of other things except what's buzzing around inside my own head. Anyway, mindfulness. You learn mindfulness by meditation. 30 minutes a day. Sit yourself down in a quiet place. Get out your yoga mat. Turn off the phone, turn off everything so you won't be distracted. And just practice breathing. Practice focusing on your breath. In and out. And in and out. And you will be distracted. You will be distracted by thoughts and feelings and memories and associations. And when you're distracted, all you do is return your attention to your breath. Being distracted is part of the way our brains work, but we can get better at not being distracted, at shutting distractions out, just by this simple practice. You know, half an hour a day every day is great, but you know, if you can do 20 minutes 4 times a week, that'll get you there. But it takes concentration and it takes effort. It's another skill to learn. What was the question?
Well, you've enlightened us in many ways with what you're talking about. I sort of got caught up in the whole breathing thing, which I really appreciate. But it's about like when you're in a feeling and something that doesn't feel good to you but feels familiar, and you don't have an outside source saying, "Hey, wake, get out of this, Lori. Get, wake up. Hey, what are you doing?" How can you have your own awareness that to help you move out of it, especially if you're in a feeling or a situation that is not helpful to you?
I think you develop an awareness with practice. I think that, sorry, thank you. For instance, one bad habit that I know applies to many people in theater and film, and many other people with depression is the voice of the inner critic. The constantly evaluating yourself and finding yourself not doing a good enough job, finding things to pick apart, things to not feel good about. This is a habit of the mind. You picked it up in grade school when you were bullied on the playground. You picked it up if your parents weren't perfect with you. You picked it up through experiences. It's a habit. It has the quality of truthiness, but it's not the truth. It's just one of those stereotypical ways of thinking that you want to free yourself from. So you start to challenge it. What's the evidence for that belief? What's the evidence for thinking I'll never get over this? And again, let those thoughts slide off, like when you're practicing mindful breathing. Identify it as a voice inside your head, but it's only a voice. It's not the truth. It's just a bad habit at work. Would you like to add?
Yeah, I'd love to.
You can.
So there's a lot of psychological studies that look at the difference between optimistic talk versus pessimistic talk, and they look at the difference between what's called one's explanatory style. So let's say that there's a certain event that happens, and you want to look at how do you explain that event. Well, what the studies have found is somebody who's more pessimistic will tend to explain a negative outcome in 3 ways. It'll be personal, it'll be pervasive, and it'll be permanent. So if something went wrong, they'd only look at the personal things that they did wrong. They'll discount anything that's external. Then it'll be pervasive. Let's say something went wrong just in your career. All of a sudden you'll start thinking, oh, this is what goes wrong with, my love life or money or health, right? It extends into all these different domains. All of a sudden it explodes out. And then the other way is it's permanent. Somebody who's more optimistic, if something went wrong, all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, it's just one, instance, it's isolated. Next time, things could be different. But somebody who is pessimistic would be like, this always happens to me, right? So this is exactly what Richard's talking about. It does have that, I love how you put it, the level of truthiness, but it starts there, right? There's something that is truthful about it, but all of a sudden it explodes into, it's completely out of perspective. And this is where you need to get it back into perspective by checking reality, exactly what Richard was saying, which is, what's the evidence for it? So as soon as you have that thought, you have to quickly think, I know this isn't true because X, Y, and Z. Or this isn't the case because I know. Because otherwise, pretty soon it'll just really explode and permeate into all of these different things. Because it's really kind of, we almost like enjoy when we get into that negative self-talk. There's something in our brain that like, oh yeah, and like, yeah, I suck at that too, right? So it's really important, or maybe this is just me, I don't know, but it's really important to, cut it off really quickly, otherwise.
I think we're really good at finding all the evidence of why we're bad, of why we're doing something wrong. I mean, you look for it, you can find it, but we're not so good at looking for the evidence of why things are different. And I think I would take it just a little step further and just look at it as if, just sort of re-examine what our experience of the world really is all about. We think that something happens outside of us and then we have an experience of it and somehow something outside of us is causing this reaction to us, but it's always our experience of life comes from within us. It doesn't come from outside. Things that happen outside could be, can look fantastic or horrible. The same exact thing can happen, and one person could have a reaction that thinks it's wonderful and feels great about it, and somebody could have a terrible reaction to it. So the things that actually happen in the world are inert. They don't have any quality until we make meaning from them. And that's when our thinking starts to get in our way about it. So I think that one of the best ways to get out of those low moments is to remember that it's just our own thinking that's getting in the way, and just to notice that, even just to notice that there's not anything to actually do. I guess there are things you can do, like different practices that you can follow, but just to even understand and recognize that whatever's happening out there is not the determining factor of how I'm allowed to feel about myself.
And that brings me right into an audition situation. When you are in an audition room and you have casting in front of you, and either there are faces that are completely blank, or maybe they're on a device and doing something, or maybe they're making notes or something like that. And the story, maybe I'm the only person, but the story, maybe other people do too, that you tell yourself while you're in that high-pressured situation. What have you found in working with actors, and Anthony too, if you'd like to answer in on this, to be able to change it into a place where we aren't looking for the expectation of what we believe we need to receive in order to do our best work?
Think the thoughts of the character.
Eliminate the assumptions about what other people are thinking. You're 90% of the time wrong.
But as soon as there's an expression which I love, BATS, bad actor thoughts. And what's remarkable is how very, very quickly you can plunge into the character's circumstances and out of the distraction of the room and the dead faces or the fact that they're eating or they're writing. And instead of thinking bad actor thoughts, as soon as you start thinking the thoughts of the character, that literally disappears. That literally disappears in an instant. I tell them, Richard, and I don't know if this is true, but I say that thought is as fast as or close to the speed of light, because it's really fast. And I know that it's very tempting to think that bitch in the waiting room has more credits than I do. I understand how much of a lollipop that can be, but it's a bitter lollipop. But at the moment that you literally start to think what your character would be thinking, I promise you, I'll bet you all $5. It goes like that. And then you are no longer thinking even negatively, like, I've got to block them out, your thoughts will not respond to pressure. If you say to those thoughts, don't think that, oh, they love that, that dragon feeds on that attention. But if you instead say, hey, why not think about this? My uncle murdered my father to marry my mother. I don't care what they're writing on their thing. Holy moly. It really, I promise you it works.
Yeah, well, there's the juiciness, because
Yes.
that's much juicier.
Yes,
And
it's even more juicy than what are they writing on my resume.
exactly. Well, and the reason I bring that up is because I think it's a pretty across the board experience with, every day or however often you go in for auditions, experiencing that and really keeping the love alive inside of yourself, and keeping yourself going so that you don't have that part of you that doesn't want to show up, really encouraging yourself to keep moving forward. And I think that's what it is about changing habits and thoughts that aren't working for us. David?
My question about that is, that's such a great thing. How can we use that in other aspects of our life when we're not in an audition? So let's say we're in other pressure situations or just going about our day, and we find that we're getting caught up in our thinking about, how that person's more attractive or that person's smarter or whatever, but we're not about to go into a character. So what can we do to use that same idea to shift our thinking in those moments that will have the same effect?
So go ahead. Adoree, you have something
No, I was just going to add like a
Yes.
personal anecdote, because this is what I noticed about myself too, because I love to worry and about something, like anything, just of thinking everything that goes wrong. So I realized that anytime I get in that mindset, then I'll go on YouTube and just watch a really stupid video. And because I'll be so distracted so this is probably the opposite of what we're talking about now, right? So because I'll be really distracted about it, then I'll forget why I was like, oh, I was worried about it. And then after I'm like kind of thinking like, oh, what was I worried about? That was fun, like thinking about it. But I realized that I just need to switch gears and do something completely different. It's also like, over the summer, I was at my mom's place and I got to walk her dog. And it was the best thing because like I would be working, but then Sparkle would come up to me and he'd bark at me and be like, oh, and it's the best thing in the world when you get to make a dog's day and tell him, okay, we'll go out, and I'll give you a walk. I'm such a good human. So every time I'd go out, and then once I started walking, I'd forget, right? And it's these things that we actually have to distract us and force us, because we can't tell ourselves, don't think about that. Like we said, that's the worst thing, to try and suppress it. So we have to force ourselves to do something completely different than we're doing in order to get out of that habitual thought.
And I think, Richard, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I do think that I think that's an excellent question you ask. If you can't imagine a role, what can you do? I think that there is that ideals are really can be of great importance to us. So I think if we picture, if we think about who we want to be, if we think about who our ideal self would be, and put our ideal self in this situation that's that where our thinking is going crazy and we're all full of distractions and we're can't seem to control things. It might help. This is sort of off the top of my head thinking, but I think to just imagine who you want to be, or imagine how Winston Churchill or Abraham Lincoln would respond to this situation. I think that could be a positive counterforce in a situation like this.
Well, it's almost like you're drawing upon a character that is very well known, as opposed to maybe the character that we're working with in the play or the TV show that we're on, that to really grab something and grab these ideas and then be able to incorporate them. Now, I'd like to say too, it's like, how about if you're in a situation, and this is completely about, being an actor. So we're not in the audition room yet, Anthony. So it's not about, let me think the character's thought, but actually dealing with the level of pressure that we put on ourselves around preparing and any resistance we might have to it, procrastinating about getting something memorized. In that kind of situation, what are some, kind of talk us through what are some success stories that you have seen or ways that people have been able to deal with situations like that? The pressure we put on, we're like, geez, if I don't book this, what's my agent going to think? If I don't book this, what does this mean about me? In that preparation process before we ever get to the audition room.
I have this way of thinking about it that separates the work of the artist from the tools that help us to enable us to get the work, to do the work of the artist. And putting the tools in their proper perspective, I think, is really important. So your tools are, I have to redo my resume, I have to get my photo taken, I have to get, all the things that, the website, whatever, all those things are the tools, but they're not the thing. And when we spend too much time and effort and thought about the tools, we get further and further and further away from being the artist. And I think a lot of times we focus way too much on the tools. And I think you should make your tools as great as they could possibly be. But when you start to obsess about them and spend so much time working on the tools that you don't go to the audition because, it's not just the perfect picture and it's not, I have to keep changing the font on my resume until it's exactly right. And I don't, so I don't actually go into the situation where I could actually be the artist that I am and that I want to be. But putting tools in their perspective and seeing them as just the tools, and these are the best tools I have at this moment, and I'm going to go with that, and I'll get, I'll improve my tools when I can. But go back to always focusing. So I work with directors a lot, and directors, even more so, I think, than actors, they, the opportunities for them to do what they do are, I think, less frequent. They don't go to auditions, so they don't get a chance to even show what they do in those limited artificial situations. But you got to get yourself back in that rehearsal room. You have to start doing the work of the artist in order to stay connected to it. And I think that you don't want to get yourself further and further away from that.
So how do you balance that out? How have you seen actors that you've worked with successfully balance that?
I mean, I think just putting it in the perspective of which are the tools and what's the thing. With actors, it's, we talk a lot about actors going to auditions and being given the opportunity to do the work that they want to be doing. And it's a really disempowering way of thinking about who we are in this business. I find that when we give over all of the power to the people who are going to make these decisions, we're, I can't be who I am. I can't be the actor who I am until somebody picks me to be that thing. So I spend a lot of time with actors talking about how they can reclaim their power and understand what that is and how they can continue to creatively pursue artistic endeavors that they want to do, irrespective of whether anybody else is picking them or not. So I draw this little diagram, which is like a circle. I'll draw it in the air. There's a circle, and inside this circle is where all the cool work is being done. All the great actors and cool people are doing all this great, and we're on the outside, like little arrows, trying to break through into this circle so we can be the cool people doing the cool stuff. So that's a perspective on what some people have about the way the business works. And then, as an alternative paradigm, I put a dot and draw a circle around the dot. Now you're the dot, and you can invite people in. Invite people into your circle. So it shifts everything. All of a sudden, it's about you doing the invitation, about you making things happen for yourself, and it's not about trying to break into some artificially conceived idea about what is going to be, satisfying and fulfilling for you over here. But if you understand what it is about this business, about doing the work that you want to do that's really fulfilling you and exciting you and the kinds of things that you want to do and roles you want to play, you can start to invite people to play with you. And that just shifts everything.
Oh,
Can
that
I
is
add one
gorgeous.
thing?
Please,
You
Anthony.
mind? This is wonderful. A young woman that I worked with is now in LA, and she had a little boy. And she said that since she's had her boy, she has had more success as an actor because her whole life no longer is riding on that particular audition. Because she now says she goes in, she does her best work she can possibly do, which is, by the way, better because she's a richer instrument, because she's participated in one of the great mysteries. But she wants to go in, do it, and leave, and she leaves it behind because she wants to get back and be with her little boy. And I think that sometimes in our desire, as you say, to get into that circle, we forget that we have our own lives. And I worry sometimes that we want to be such actors that we start to cheat ourselves of being human beings. When your whole life is riding on that one audition, I don't think anybody can function at all well under that kind of pressure. I think maybe the richer our lives, the less pressure is on us to blow them away in the audition. And at the moment that you don't crowd them, they won't retreat from you.
You know, we have to close. Leaving it on that level of honoring our humanity is so beautiful. I want to thank each and every one of you for the contributions that you made to all of us tonight. I would also like to say that if you want to check out any of these fine folks, you can. They all remember the thing that you got in your email, your invitation. They each have websites. They have places that you can check them out. Please do. And if you want to talk to people afterwards, you can do that as well. But you can reach out and also be able to watch this video, which you participated in, to really. I want to hear these things over and over again. But I would really like you to thank our wonderful panelists and for what they shared with us tonight.